Hello, welcome to the Halloween bonus episode of Stories for Wonderful Children. I don't tell scary stories, but this one's a little more spooky than usual, so for very young or very sensitive listeners, you might want to preview it ahead of time. And of course, this story was told only this week, so the children are older, but just as wonderful. Enjoy the story. Okay, ladies, for tonight's story, I need you both to tell me of an animal that you find a little frightening. Can you think of one?
Spiders. Centipede.
Spiders, centipedes. Okay. This story is going to be our Halloween special story. So I need a name. Diana, give me a name.
Alice.
Alice.
But I wanted to name the ceiling fan.
The disrespect. Oh my gosh.
Once there was a girl named Alice, and she had had a most excellent Halloween. She had gone out trick-or-treating. She had worn her costume, which, what do you think her costume was, Katie?
Cat.
She was a cat, yes. She was. She was a calico cat. And she had spent weeks perfecting her meow and her
When during Halloween would she be purring?
Well, here's how she did it. She would go up to somebody's house and she would say, meow, trick or treat. And then, when they dropped candy in her bag, she would go, thank you. And she would purr. Anyway, she had brought home a big bag of candy, and she had eaten some of it, probably more than she should have. And when she went to bed, her tummy was a little rumbly, and she fell asleep. And then she had a bad dream, perhaps spurred by having too much candy right before bed. Who knows? But she woke up and her tummy was rumbly and she'd had a bad dream. And so she yelled, "Mom! Mom!" And her mother, after a minute or two, came in wearing her fuzzy pink bathrobe and her fuzzy pink bunny slippers, and she said, "What's wrong, Alice?" And Alice said, "I had a bad dream. I had a nightmare, and now my tummy's all rumbly and kind of hurts from maybe eating too much candy." And her mother said, "Oh dear," and she sort of patted her on the head and rubbed her back a little bit, and she said, "I tell you what, I'll go downstairs and I'll get you some medicine for your tummy, and I'll get you a glass of water, and I'll come back up and you can go back to sleep, okay? It was just a dream." And Alice said, "Okay." And her mother headed off for downstairs. And Alice was sitting there in bed, and she was still feeling kind of a little creeped out from her bad dream. And so she was sitting up in bed, and as she was sitting up in bed, she thought she heard the faintest sound from her door. And she looked over the door, and there was something moving from the hallway. And it was moving across her floor, and as it got closer, she could see that it had many, many legs.
Oh no, no!
And
This is my worst nightmare.
And she thought, "Oh, it's a centipede." And just then the centipede stopped at the foot of her bed, and it said in a tiny voice, there's something scary out in the hallway. Can I sleep with you? And Alice said, no, I don't want any centipedes in my bed. And the centipede said, I'm scared, please. And Alice knew what it was like to be scared. And so she said, okay, you can sleep. You can sleep at the end of my bed, but you stay down there, okay? And the centipede said, oh, thank you. And it crawled up the bedpost, and it curled up down at the foot of her bed. And Alice looked at it for a minute, but it wasn't moving. And she was sitting there for a second, and then she thought, I wonder what the centipede was scared of. And she looked towards her door, and she could see something moving in the hallway. And it came into her room, and it crawled across the floor. And she leaned over, and she could see that it was a very large spider. And she thought, oh my goodness, that must be what scared the centipede. That is a big spider. And the spider crawled right up to the end of her bed, and then it stopped, and it said, there's something scary out in the hallway. Can I sleep in your bed? And Alice said, And the spider said, please, I'm scared. And Alice, who knew what it was like to be scared, said, okay, but you scared the centipede, and the centipede's already sleeping down at the end of my bed, so you sleep in the other corner, and you have to promise to leave the centipede alone, all right? And the spider said, okay. And the spider climbed up the leg of her bed, and it curled up in the other corner, tucking its legs underneath itself until it was a little ball, and then it stopped moving, and Alice thought it must have fallen asleep. And she wondered just then what could have scared the spider. And so she looked over towards the door, and there was something moving across the floor of her room. And she leaned over to see what it was. And as it got closer, she could see that it was a snake. And the snake crawled right up the foot of her bed. And Alice was a little nervous about the whole thing. And the snake said, I'm scared. Can I sleep in your bed? And Alice said, you're a snake. What do you have to be scared of? And the snake said, there's something out in the hall. It's big, and it's fuzzy, and it has heads on its head, and it has heads on its feet, and I'm scared of it. And the snake looked frightened, and Alice knew what it was like to be frightened at night. And so she said, all right, but you scared the spider, and so you can't sleep down near the spider and the centipede. And she scooted over and she said, here, you sleep there, but you have to promise no biting. And the snake said, I wouldn't bite you. Humans taste terrible. And so Alice scooted over, and the snake climbed up into her bed. It was curling up into a perfect little ball when it looked toward the door and said, there it is. And Alice heard the sound of something moving out in the hall. And she looked, and into the doorway stepped her mother with a head on her head and her bunny foot slippers on her feet and her big fuzzy pink bathrobe. And the snake said, it's scary. And it slithered down off her bed and out the window. And it yelled so loud that it woke up the spider that said, I'm scared. And the spider ran down her bedpost and out the window, and the centipede went following after. And her mother walked across the room and said, how are you feeling? And Alice said, well, I was feeling a little scared after my dream, But I guess everybody's scared of something sometimes, and usually it all turns out okay. My tummy's still a little rumbly from all that candy, though." And her mother said, "It's okay, dear." And she gave her some tummy medicine, and Alice drank her glass of water, and then she laid down, and her mother rubbed her back until she drifted off to sleep and had only sweet dreams of candy and cats and trick-or-treating. And that's the end. Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's story, but questions and clever commentary were supplied by my children. The intro and outro music is by Brandon Thompson. If you enjoy the show, please tell someone about it, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Our email is storiesforwonderfulchildren@gmail.com, and you can also find us on Facebook or Twitter. I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.